What happens when Vladimir Putin builds his entire war strategy around something that he believes that the United States will never touch, and then the United States goes ahead and touches it anyway? Because for years, Russia's ghost tanker fleet was supposed to be untouchable, invisible, off the radar, a floating money laundering machine that kept Putin's war in the Ukraine alive while sanctions were treated like suggestions. And let's be honest, guys, most people who are watching this, they were told the same thing, that sanctions don't work, that Russia always finds a way around them, that the US talks tough but never actually pulls the trigger. That frustration, that sense that the rules only apply to regular people, not global strongmen, oh, that's real. But something changed. Under President Donald J. Trump, the United States Navy and the U.S. Coast Guard didn't issue another warning. They didn't hold another press conference. They took the ships, Russian-linked oil tankers, sanctioned Venezuelan crude, seized in international waters without firing a single shot or sinking a single ship. And the moment that those tankers were boarded, Moscow realized something terrifying. If their ships aren't safe anywhere, then neither is their system funding their war. But tonight, guys, I'm going to show you how Putin bet everything on a shadow ghost fleet, why he believed it was immune from U.S. power, and how one move at sea quietly collapsed Russia's oil war machine. Because this wasn't just a seizure. This was the moment that the game changed. Be sure to drop a like for the video and subscribe, share this video, because here's the part that most people were never told. Russia did not just ignore sanctions. It built an entire parallel oil shipping system to defeat them. And so what's known as this shadow fleet, this is a web of aging tankers constantly reflagged, renamed, and insured through shell companies, okay? Now, these ships, they move sanctioned oil from Russia, Venezuela, and Iran, staying just outside of normal maritime oversight.
Tonight, the bold U.S. seizure of 2 oil tankers accused of transporting sanctioned Venezuelan oil, including a Russian-flagged vessel that had been evading U.S. forces for weeks.
Now, the purpose wasn't subtle. This fleet existed to keep oil money flowing when legal markets closed. Every barrel that moved through these ships, they meant cash for Vladimir Putin's war in the Ukraine, fuel for Venezuela's collapsing regime, and leverage for Iran. They exploited gray zones in international law, swapping flags mid-voyage, spoofing transponders, and operating through ports willing to look the other way. Now, for years, it worked. Sanctions existed on paper, but enforcement was rather weak. That bred confidence in Moscow, the belief that this fleet was effectively untouchable. Now, that assumption, that was the foundation of everything that followed.
There can be a line, in fact, drawn from Venezuela across the Atlantic Ocean and then over to Russia's war in Ukraine, as we're seeing it here. Remember, Russia's own exports of oil, funding its own invasion of Ukraine.
The carrot and the stick, right? The carrot has always been stop the war in Ukraine and join us and let's do a lot of business. We'll buy all your oil again. The stick is we're going to slowly strangle you and there's nothing you can do about it.
And so this is where the strategy changed. Under President Donald J. Trump, the United States stopped pretending sanctions were symbolic. Operation Southern Spear wasn't a press release. It was a maritime enforcement campaign. The administration declared a functional oil quarantine around Venezuelan waters, backed by the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Coast Guard.
Near Iceland, that Russian-flagged tanker seized, the Marinara, formerly known as the Bella One, being pursued by the U.S. Coast Guard. That vessel also linked to Venezuela's illicit oil trade, eluding capture for weeks.
Now, this wasn't about one ship. This was about denying access, cutting off the ability to move sanctioned oil anywhere without consequence. Vessels tied to illicit trade were tracked, shadowed, and when legal thresholds were met, they were seized. That is the key detail that most people miss. This wasn't escalation. It was law enforcement at scale. No missiles, no strikes, no nuclear weapons, no nukes, just warrants, ships, and steel decks. And once the machinery started moving, Russia's shadow fleet, it went from invisible to exposed almost overnight. Now, I want to pause here just for a second because this moment right here actually kind of mirrors something that a lot of people are watching and are dealing with right now. Now, there's 2 types of retirees, okay? There are retirees hoping that their Medicare plan holds up when they actually need it, and there are retirees who already checked their coverage before the problem hits. Now, one of these groups actually lies awake at night wondering, well, what happens if something goes wrong? Now, the other group, they already know where they stand, and they sleep a lot better because of it. Most people eventually figure out which group they want to be in. They just don't always decide early enough. And this is why so many people are already calling the phone number at the bottom of your screen right here, 909-563-8279, or they're visiting askchapter.org/Ron. There's a link down below. You can click the link right now, not because something went wrong, but because they don't want to find out the hard way about their Medicare plan. All right, so let's get back to what happened at sea. This is the moment that Moscow stopped pretending. The tanker Marinara, previously known as Bella 1, wasn't some random ship. It was a Russian-linked ghost tanker that had been evading U.S. tracking for weeks, bouncing flags, altering documentation, and running a classic shadow fleet playbook. It was moving sanctioned Venezuelan crude across the Atlantic. This was money that ultimately fed Russia's war machine. Now, the U.S. tracked it anyway. Near Iceland, in international waters, U.S. forces boarded the vessel under federal authority. The ship was reportedly operating under a Russian flag at the time. Now, here's the part that really matters. It wasn't just sailing alone. It had Russian naval proximity meant to signal deterrence. Now, that deterrence failed. No shots were fired, no nukes were issued, no confrontation. The ship was taken. And in that moment, Russia learned something brutal. A Russian flag no longer guarantees safety. If the Marinara seizure was shocking, the MV Sajida proved it wasn't a fluke. This was the 7th sanctioned tanker seized as a part of the U.S. maritime campaign, captured in the Caribbean for violating the oil quarantine tied to Venezuela. By this point, the pattern was unmistakable. These weren't isolated incidents. These were systemic interdictions.
We have learned the U.S. has seized 2 oil tankers just hours apart, including a Russian-flagged vessel after spending weeks evading U.S. forces. And tonight, the new demand now coming in from the Kremlin.
Each seizure tightened the net. Insurance firms pulled back. Ports stopped cooperating. Operators realized that sailing under fake flags or dark transponders no longer brought protection. It brought attention. The Sajida mattered because it showed scale. The United States was not sending messages anymore. It was removing capacity, period. Every seized ship meant fewer barrels moved, fewer dollars laundered, and less oxygen for sanctioned regimes. So at this point, Russia's shadow fleet wasn't shrinking quietly, it was collapsing publicly. Now, here's where the damage really set in, okay? Russia doesn't fund its government like most countries. Oil is the engine. Roughly 1/3 of Russia's revenue flows directly from energy exports. And when sanctions hit, Putin's workaround wasn't innovation, it was evasion. The shadow fleet was the workaround. And so by moving oil through Venezuelan routes, reflagged tankers, and friendly intermediaries, Russia kept cash moving, even while claiming sanctions were failing. But the moment that the U.S. Navy and Coast Guard started seizing ships, that entire strategy cracked. Because oil that can't move is oil that can't pay soldiers, can't buy weapons, can't sustain a war. This wasn't symbolic pressure. This was financial suffocation.
Let me tell you what it's doing. I think he is fully suffocating Putin to the point where you ever gone into a fight and the guy is choking you and you're willing to do anything and everything to get out of it, or else you're going to pass out and you do something really dumb and reckless? What's Putin's next move?
Each interdiction didn't just block a shipment. It injected fear into insurers, ports, and buyers worldwide. Russia didn't lose a ship. It lost confidence in the system that kept its war alive. And so while Russia was bleeding quietly, Venezuela felt it immediately. For years, Nicolas Maduro's regime survived by trading oil through these sanction-backed channels, shipping crude it couldn't properly refine and then swapping it with allies like Russia and Iran. That oil kept the lights on, the security forces loyal, and the regime breathing. Operation Southern Spear crushed that pipeline. So with tankers seized and routes shut down, Venezuela's exports stalled, revenue collapsed, and suddenly, Nicolas Maduro wasn't insulated by geopolitics anymore. He was exposed by enforcement. This matters because Venezuela wasn't just a participant. Venezuela was the hub. Break Venezuela's oil flow and Russia loses a laundering route. Iran loses leverage. Cuba loses support. The United States didn't attack Caracas. It turned off the valve. And when the oil stopped moving, the regime started wobbling. And, you know, there's this parallel here that really hits closer to home than most people want to admit. Now, most people, they don't even realize how draining it is to keep starting over. Every month feels like a reset. Income comes in, bills go out. Nothing really stacks. Nothing compounds. You work, you pay, you repeat, and the second something slows down, everything feels fragile again. That is how life is outside the room, because inside the room, people aren't guessing anymore. They're building systems. They're creating income that doesn't reset every 30 days. They're focused on momentum, not hustle. And so this is why flywheel income society exists. Not shortcuts, not hype, structure, consistency, and people building right alongside other people inside the group who are done doing it alone. Now, if you're tired of income that keeps on restarting, the link is down below right there in the description. Click the link right now. Join us over in the Flywheel Income Society. And yeah, all right, so let's get back to what happened next, because this is where the international fallout really began. This is where the argument shifted from shipping lanes to global order. Now, Moscow immediately cried foul, accusing the United States of violating international maritime law, overstepping authority and privacy. But here's a real problem for Russia. The seizures were carried out under existing U.S. sanctions law, with federal warrants against vessels moving sanctioned Venezuelan crude. That legal footing matters because the U.S. wasn't inventing new rules. It was enforcing old ones that had been ignored for years. And once enforcement became real, other countries took notice. Shipping insurers reassessed risk. Flag states got nervous. Ports quietly stopped cooperating with vessels tied to the shadow fleet. This created a clash between sanctions evasion culture and law-based enforcement. And for the first time, enforcement was winning. The legal debate wasn't about innocence. It was about whether Russia could still hide behind ambiguity. Now, Russia's reaction revealed more than its statements ever could. Yes, there were diplomatic protests. Yes, state media accused Washington of escalation. But beneath the noise, it was something far more telling. Russia didn't retaliate because it couldn't. The shadow fleet was supposed to be deniable, disposable, low risk. But when ships started disappearing, taken legally, publicly, and repeatedly, Moscow faced a reality it hadn't planned for. Its war economy was exposed. Retaliating at sea would invite open conflict. Letting it continue would mean watching oil revenue continue to evaporate. Either option was bad for Russia. And so this is what strategic vulnerability looks like. It's not tanks rolling backwards, it's systems quietly failing. The illusion that Russia's maritime network was untouchable collapsed.
Bold U.S. seizure of 2 oil tankers accused of transporting sanctioned Venezuelan oil, including a Russian-flagged vessel that had been evading U.S. forces for weeks. U.S. helicopters swooping in during a dramatic pre-dawn operation. Elite Coast Guard forces rappelling onto the deck of the Sophia, a tanker sailing in international waters near the Caribbean. Near Iceland, that Russian-flagged tanker seized, the Marinara, formerly known as the Bella One, being pursued by the U.S. Coast Guard. That vessel also linked to Venezuela's illicit oil trade, eluding capture for weeks after an earlier attempt to seize the ship in the Caribbean did not succeed.
And once that illusion broke, everything built on top of it started to wobble. Now, here's another piece that most people overlook. The United States wasn't acting alone. Behind the scenes, allies, especially the United Kingdom, provided intelligence, maritime surveillance, and even diplomatic cover. That matters because shadow fleets thrive when enforcement is fragmented. Once allies coordinate, the escape route disappears. British tracking assets help monitor tanker movements. European ports quietly align their compliance standards. Insurers based in allied countries started backing away. No dramatic announcements, just alignment. Now that coordination sent a very clear message, far louder than any press conference or any missiles being fired. This wasn't a temporary crackdown. This was a coalition enforcing sanctions as written. And this is exactly what truly boxed Moscow in. Russia could dismiss one country, but it couldn't dismiss a network. When allied navies, insurers, and ports all move together, a shadow fleet stops being clever and it starts being trapped. And so once the ship stopped moving, the market reacted. Buyers who relied on discounted Russian or Venezuelan crude suddenly faced uncertainty. Deliveries stalled, insurance premiums spiked, black market discounts widened, a sign of desperation, not strength. This is the hidden cost of enforcement. Sanctioned oil becomes harder to sell, riskier to buy, and less profitable to move. Middlemen demand higher cuts, payments slow down, entire supply chains fray. Meanwhile, legitimate producers gain leverage. Compliance became safer than evasion. Now, for Russia, this meant fewer buyers willing to play games. For Venezuela, fewer routes to sneak barrels out. And the global oil market, a repricing of risk. Shadow fleets, they don't collapse because of headlines. They collapse because the math stops working. So this is where everything connects. Russia's war in Ukraine has always been less about battlefield dominance and more about endurance. Putin believed that if Russia could outlast sanctions, if oil money kept flowing quietly, the West would eventually fracture. The Shadow Fleet was central to that plan. But when oil revenue becomes unstable, wars become unsustainable. Fuel costs rise, procurement slows, allies demand discounts Russia can't afford to give anymore. And domestic pressure builds as budgets tighten. And this is why the tanker seizures matter more than any single battle. They don't just hurt Russia today, they shorten the timeline of the war. Sanctions didn't fail, they were never enforced until now. And so once enforcement began, the economic reality caught up. And suddenly, the question in Moscow isn't how long Ukraine can hold, it's how long Russia can afford to keep fighting. So what happens next, right? Expect more seizures, more legal actions, more pressure on insurers, ports, and shell companies tied to the Shadow Fleet. Once a system's exposed, it doesn't recover quietly. It collapses under scrutiny. The bigger shift is psychological. Russia now knows its ships are not safe anywhere. That changes behavior fast. Routes dry up, operators quit, middlemen disappear. And here's the final point. This didn't require war. It didn't require nukes. It didn't require escalation. It required law enforcement backed by resolve. Putin believed that his ghost fleet made him untouchable. He bet his war on that belief. The United States called the bluff. Trump called that bluff. And when those tankers were taken, the illusion shattered, not just for Russia, but for every regime that thought sanctions were optional. That's the real story. If you made it this far in the video, drop a like, subscribe, share it. I'll see you on the next one.